Class, the other day I told you that when Gandhiji gave the call for Swaraj, it was interpreted in different ways by different people. Now, in the textbook, three categories of people have been given. First is the rebellion in the countryside that we did the other day, that was under Baba Ramchandra. The peasant movement took place in Awadh. Today we'll be doing two more. First, we would be doing the movement of the tribal peasants, and the second would be the Swaraj in the plantations. So if you get a question that Swaraj meant different things to different people, or different categories of people had their own notion of Swaraj or their own interpretations of Swaraj, then you will write down all the three and you will explain them very, very briefly. But you can get one question on all the three movements separately. If you get a 3 or a 4 or a 5 mark question on rebellion in the countryside, then you will explain the entire movement in Awadh. If you get of the tribal peasants, then you will explain of the Gudam district of Andhra Pradesh, where the movement was organized under the leadership of Aluri Sitaram Raju. And if you are asked to write about the notion of Swaraj interpreted by the plantation workers in Assam, you will write the answer for 5 or 3 marks. The tribal peasants interpreted or understood the message of Gandhiji and the idea of Swaraj in yet another way. This is different from the notion of Swaraj as understood in the countryside in Awadh, where the movement was organized under the heavy revenue, heavy taxes and the oppression of the big landlords or talukdars. In the Gudam hills of Andhra Pradesh, for example, a militant guerrilla movement. Militant is a violent form of movement. Guerrilla means here the tribals used to hide in the forest, and then they used to pounce upon their enemies. So here a guerrilla movement spread in early 1920s, and it was not a form of struggle that the Congress could approve. What this means is that Gandhiji never approved of any violent movement. But here in the Gudam Hills, the tribals were resorting to violence also. Here, as in the other forest regions, the colonial government had closed large forest areas, preventing people from entering the forest to graze their cattle or to collect fuel wood and fruits. When the Britishers had come to India, they had passed certain forest laws, and under these forest laws, they had categorized the forests into protected, reserved and unclassed forest. So they did not allow the tribals to use the products or enter the forest that they had been using for many, many years, for many, many generations. So these tribals could not go into the forest to graze their cattle or to collect the wood for their fuel or fruits, or not even use up the water of the streams flowing there. This made the hill people angry. Why it made the hill people angry? It was because that it was their own forest which the Britishers forbade them from entering into. The Britishers did not allow them to use the products which they had been using for many, many years, which were the gifts of nature. Not only were their livelihoods affected, but they felt that their traditional rights were being denied. Not only their generation, but many, many generations before them had been living in this state forever. They had been living like this only, but now the Britishers had deprived them of their customary rights of grazing or using the forest products. When the government began forcing them to contribute Begar is forced labor, for road building, the hill people revolted. The person who came to lead them was an interesting figure. He was Aluri Sitaram Raju, who claimed that he had a variety of special powers. He could make correct astrological predictions and heal people, and he could survive even bullet shots. So he told the people that he had some he had some special powers. He could make correct astrological predictions and he could even survive bullet shots. People were captivated by him. People really started believing that what he was saying was true. So the rebels proclaimed that he was an incarnation or avatar of God, that he had been sent by God on this earth to take up their grievances. Raju talked about the greatness of Gandhiji. He was even impressed by him. He was inspired by the non cooperation movement, and he even persuaded the people to wear khadi and to give up drinking. But at the same time, he also asserted that India could be liberated only by the use of force, not non violence. In many ways, he appreciated what Gandhiji was doing. He even asked his own followers to adopt some of the principles of Gandhiji, but he believed that if you wanted to get what you want, if you had to get what you wanted, you could even use violent methods, and this was something which Gandhiji never approved of in his movement. The Gudem rebels attacked police stations, attempted to kill British officials, and carried on guerrilla warfare for achieving Swaraj. All these things had not been laid down by Gandhiji in his non cooperation movement, but here in Gudem Hills, they were doing all these things. Raju was captured and executed in 1924. He was killed, and then over time, he became a folk hero. Now, class, this is the third interpretation of the meaning of Swaraj or the call of Swaraj as given by Gandhiji. This is the Swaraj for the plantation workers of Assam. During the British rule, the British had a number of plantations in different parts of the country, especially in Assam. They had employed the Indian workers to work there on the plantations, and these plantation workers too heard about Gandhiji's Swaraj, and they had their own understanding or interpretation of Gandhiji's call and idea or notion of Swaraj. For the plantation workers in Assam, freedom meant the right to move freely in and out of the confined space in which they were enclosed, and it meant retaining a link with the village from which they had come. Now, all these workers who were working on the plantation in Assam could not go back to their homes as and when they wanted. Now, there had been an act which that is the Indian Immigration Act of 1859, which did not allow these plantation workers to leave the tea gardens without the permission of the government or of the plantation owners, and this was not always granted. And they were rarely given this permission. So when these plantation workers who had been tied to the plantations in Assam, when they heard of the NCM or non-cooperation movement, thousands of workers defied means they went against the authorities, they left the plantations and they wanted to go back home. They thought that Gandhi Raj was coming and everyone would be given land in their own villages. When they heard Gandhiji's call for non-cooperation, they thought that Gandhiji was telling them to go back to the villages from where they had come and they would be given land there. But this was not actually what the call for NCM was. Now, when they tried to leave the plantations, when they wanted to come back to their villages, when they reached the ports, when they reached the railway stations, they were stranded because there were railway and steamer strike. And when they were waiting there for the trains and the ships and boats, they were caught by the police and they were very, very badly beaten up and taken back to the plantations from where they had tried to escape.